The James Show Podcast.
Did your kids make it through the first week of school? Yeah, mine are already griping. Right now we have Trump and Putin in the middle of summit talks in Alaska right now, trying to work on a deal between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States to get a ceasefire going over there. And so the longer they're in there, the more optimistic you should be. The more optimism should grow. If there's an immediate impasse, if there was the suspicion of an immediate impasse, it probably would have come up already. So that doesn't mean this is going to be successful. That doesn't mean everything's going to work out and we're all going to have live happily ever after. It does mean that even if we don't get a final deal reached today, it's a reasonable assumption that progress is being made. And that's a good thing. Everyone should applaud that. It's a strange political situation to be in, though, because some people who you can tell who the honest brokers in the media are or in politics are judging their reaction to stories like this. Because if you're rooting against this summit just because you don't want Trump to get a win, well, that's pretty ugly. War should continue just so the guy that you don't like doesn't get a win, so there might not be any positive. It's more important that no one has any positive perception of your political enemies than peace, than ending a war, than the suffering of hundreds of thousands, over 1 million now. I was trying to look up some numbers here, and when they talk about the casualty report, now casualty doesn't always mean deaths. Casualty can mean deaths or injuries, but depending on how you define it. I saw on C-SPAN right before the planes landed, they were going over a bunch of numbers. Russia has a casualty count of 950,000. Ukraine, 400,000. That's a lot of casualties. Now, that's not all deaths and injuries. But 1 million Russians, 950,000. Can I just round it up and say 1 million? Now, Russia can take this, even though they have more than twice the amount of casualties. It's a smaller fraction of their population than what Ukraine is dealing with. Ukraine is a country of 38 million people. Russia is a country of 144 million people. So Russia's 3 times the size of Ukraine as far as population goes? Do they have 3 times the casualties? Nope. So Russia's actually on a per capita basis coming out ahead, but also their margin for error is a lot bigger. Russia, and I hate to be so flippant about 400,000 casualties, but Russia can afford to lose 400,000 men, a lot more than Ukraine can. And Ukraine is having a harder time replacing them with Russia than Russia is. So while the numbers look terrible for Russia, that might not be as much of an incentive as you would think to get Putin to want to end this war. Putin's like, look, the casualty trade-offs don't bother me. If we keep going down this road, he'll win. Ukraine will fold before Russia does. So we may think some of this is a big sticking point, but remember, you're a nice, decent human being who is listening to WBAP on a beautiful August afternoon with actually pretty good weather considering it's August. You're not a bloodthirsty tyrant. You're not a dictator. You're not a guy who rose up through the ranks of the KGB. And in one of the most powerful yet dangerous and corrupt countries in the world, you came out on top. You are the strong men of strong men. And you've been able to hold on to that power since what? The late 90s? Yeah, we had that little brief flirtation with after Putin ran through both of his terms. Remember when he stuck in Medvedev, his little puppet? And no one bought that Medvedev was anything other than a stand-in for Putin and totally beholden to Putin. In fact, it was so bad that I was like, well, if everyone's just going to admit it, then I'll run for president again and we can cut this charade out. And he did. And he won. So when you have a system of governance like this, where only the most ruthless, the most cunning, and the most cutthroat get to the top, that's who Trump's sitting across the table with right now. And remember, he doesn't think like you and I do. He doesn't have to. He shouldn't. But that could be a big impediment to peace right there, is the fact that If you care about human death and suffering, you want to come to a peace agreement, even if it hurts, even if you don't like the terms completely, even if you find the terms pretty disgusting, you find death of your fellow man even worse. Remember, some people don't find that worse. Some people are indifferent to the human suffering of others. I don't know if he's a psychopath or a sociopath or just a shrewd businessman who manages to dissociate himself from the humanness of the situation. But don't think that Putin is running to the table begging for peace here. He's going to get something out of it. Trump's going to be criticized for it. Whatever happens, if there is a peace agreement, you know how it's going to be reported. Just go ahead and get your mind ready for that. It'll be Trump capitulated to Putin. We told you Trump was Putin's puppet, or Trump was Putin's bee, or whatever the latest Russia conspiracy theory of the day is. All right, coming up next, Brent Sadler with the conservative think tank Heritage Foundation coming in to ask the politics of the situation and what does Russia really want out of this? Now, listen, when Monday rolls around, you're going to get a nice summary of what happened, if any progress was made, what progress was made, what changes, what's the next step. And we'll go back to the rest of the headlines and, talk about some other fun things. But today, all eyes are on Alaska. Don't get to say that very often. And this state that used to be part of the Russia, which is now part of the United States, kind of seems like the perfect middle ground for Trump, Putin, sit down, get across the table, see if these two kids can't hammer out some sort of deal and we can end this silly war and move along. My next guest from one of America's great conservative think tanks, the Heritage Foundation, Brent Sadler. Welcome to the James Show, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me on today.
All right, so from the point of view of a foreign affairs expert, we have an uneven list of demands at the table. Trump wants peace. He wants a ceasefire. Putin wants all kinds of things. Can we narrow that down? What does Putin need to come out of this with to get a peace deal?
I'm not so sure Putin's actually interested in the peace deal. I think he wants to run the clock as his military seems to be gaining a little bit momentum before the weather changes and the whole military operations basically get slowed down by the weather and mud, historic kind of mud that's in Ukraine. But I think if this meeting is a failure, it actually is far worse for Putin than it is for anyone else.
Well, Brent, explain to me why is this so important for Putin? Why can't he just keep going on with the status quo? Because, look, the cynic in me says if the status quo continues, eventually Putin's going to win. Ukraine can't keep this up as long as Russia can.
So the pressure that's on Putin, it's important to note, why is he coming to the United States today to meet Trump? He's had numerous phone calls, and he's actually managed to piss off Trump in the process.
Right.
He's compelled. So the pressure, the thing that's changed, one, European nations are buying American weapons to accelerate the flow of arms into Ukraine. So pressure on the battlefield. And I don't think Trump really, quite frankly, is willing to entertain putting limits on Zelensky on how he uses those weapons like the Biden administration did, that we're very worried about escalation. The other thing that's changed is the secondary sanctions. So India is the number 2 largest customer of Russian oil. They're going to start facing fines and tariffs if they continue with that. The other is China, and China's the biggest customer of Russian oil, but also been providing microelectronics and all kind of industrial support to the Russian war machine. So I don't think it's in either New Delhi or Beijing's interest to start having economic pressure placed on them by Trump while they're benefiting from this trade with Russia right now. And Putin needs that in order to sustain the war effort in Ukraine. So he's compelled to be in Alaska. If this meeting fails, he's very likely to lose some of that support. And he's also going to have a hard time trying to keep the momentum on the battlefield.
We're talking with Brent Sadler from the Heritage Foundation. I only see upside for Trump. If he doesn't get a peace deal here, that's just status quo. It's kind of hard to blame him for that. If he does get a peace deal, he looks like a great guy. So does he really have much on the line, politically speaking, as a result of this summit?
I think you captured it about right. I mean, Putin's the one that really needs to deliver.
Well, hang on. That's my
for
next
his
question.
benefactors.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I was going to say that's my next question. Putin, we think that he's a dictator and no one can knock him out of a seat of power, but there's oligarchs under him. I'm sorry, am I interrupting lunch? Are you at a Shoney's or something?
No.
Okay.
No. There's a lot of activity around where I'm on the road.
Well, it sounds like you're at like the Sizzler or something. But how much politically can Putin sustain this war? Is he ever at risk of losing his job?
Well, I mean, he's always close to falling out of a window or having unfortunate tea incident.
Yeah.
But the real issue is him being able to sustain the war effort in Ukraine. If he fails on that, then Russia doesn't benefit, and it's a national issue. It's actually much bigger than Putin.
Okay, so let's talk about the economics here. The economics in Ukraine have been devastating. It's been a big pain in the butt for Russia. Is there really any economic hit for us from dealing with this war?
Economically, not as much. There's a lot of opportunity. I mean, the Europeans need to be buying American petroleum, not Russian, as well as India should be buying American petroleum, not Russian. So there could be a benefit, but we haven't really grown the capacity the last 4 years to do that. So there's an upside. The downside to this is actually strategic and military, because the Chinese are certainly taking a note of what's happening in Ukraine. And if things don't go a certain way, they may see an opportunity to stir up trouble for us in the Pacific. And that's the real downside to this whole thing.
The other thing that I think is going to be the most important variable to watch after the summit is what's Ukraine's reaction to this. You know, I feel like it doesn't matter what happens here, Ukraine reserves the right to blow this whole agreement up.
Well, I don't think there's any agreement that's going to be in this discussion up in Alaska. The key thing is for Trump to assess if Putin's sincere for trying to put something on the table that's less than a maximalist, ridiculous, position for a ceasefire. And if he is, then the next step is to bring Zelensky in and actually move forward on the details of an actual negotiated solution or ceasefire.
How long do you think this is going to take?
It's a good question. I mean, I think what happens on the battlefield is the real bellwether for how things progress. And when the weather changes towards the end of September and into October, and that entire front turns into a muddy hell, I think that's when diplomacy and potential for a ceasefire becomes much more realistic, as both sides realize they're not going to be able to fight their way to a better position.
All right. Good talk. Interesting stuff. This is Brent Sadler, foreign affairs expert with the Heritage Foundation, America's greatest conservative think tank. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have the TVs. Well, they keep going to commercial. So I have another window open here to the C-SPAN feed, and they have a live shot in Anchorage at the two podiums where we're expecting the two gentlemen, Trump and Putin, to come out and have a chat at some point. Now, we're sort of soft expecting this at 4, but they don't have to follow a schedule. This isn't 8th grade homeroom. They could leave early. They could leave late. They could stay for 48 hours straight. But the background has pursuing peace is on the backdrop behind the podium. And that's pretty good. Who came up with that? We have ad wizards who are working on this. So you listen to these commercials, buy everything they tell you to buy. I'm going to keep an eye on these podiums. When they come out, we're going to jump to it. So if you hear an awkward jump in the programming, it's because we're going to try and bring you history as it happens here on WBAP. My next guest answers a lot of these foreign policy questions on what's going on the other side of the ocean. Has been invaluable on the James Show and following this story through all its weird twists and turns. Dr. Jeff Brodeur from Rigaku back on the James Show. He has expertise in chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear consulting. And rate your level of optimism on the likelihood of success of this summit, Jeff.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir, and thanks for the invitation. I'd like to sleep on that, and I can go on either side of the fence. So 5 out of 10 right now. I may feel something different in the morning after I see the press conference. My initial observation is that Trump looked like a fighter who was itching to get in the ring. I don't know if you noticed his hand and his eye movements when there were 3x3 in that bilateral, and the news reporters were asking questions. But he didn't look anxious. He looked ready to get down to business. In fact, he whispered over to Steve Witkoff something, and then Steve backed his chair off and distanced himself from the president as if he were encroaching on him. Anyway, and I think the welcome that the United States presented to Putin was thoughtful and full of messages. If you've got Putin who has to walk through a gauntlet of F-22 fighters, and then as soon as he gets to the podium, you've got a B-2 bomber flyover flanked by F-22s, that signals military strength, and you're getting ready to embark a negotiation with a leader who means what he says and he does what he says.
You know, I was mentioning earlier, a previous guest agreed with me, and then since then I even got an email here from Rick and Past Christiane where everyone seems to be in agreement that Ukraine's going to have to give up some territory, and they're talking about the two oblasts, Donbass and Donetsk. Do you think Ukraine's going to be okay with that?
No, I don't, but I don't ever think we're going to get there, to be honest with you. I think Putin's end goal at this meeting is to survive the winter. I think he's going in asking for the world, and he's going to back off, showing good faith. I think he'll be happy with a 6-month ceasefire beginning about 1 October. That allows him to survive the winter, to rearm and refit. His new recruits hitting the front line right now have about it's reported about 2 weeks worth of training. In the United States, our basic training is about 10 weeks. So 180 days, he can get about 18 courses unless he does them simultaneously. He can mobilize some combat power in 6 months. But it doesn't matter what he says. I think he's going to agree to a short-term ceasefire, and then he'll pick up where he left off next spring. That's my observation.
So what do you think Ukraine's role in all this is really? Because, I mean, they talk a big game, but if we come to an agreement and they don't want to work with that, then what, we just going to turn them over to Russia?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Zelensky is over his head. He's postponed elections till the end of the war. That's problematic for the Ukrainians. We need a different personality leading that nation. There are a number of tactical things that they can do to their advantage. They're just not doing it. He seems to be subcontracting out military capability. The only thing that I think they're proud of and they're known of right now, don't get me wrong, they've got some great fighters on the front line, but there aren't very many. And I think a 6-month peace deal, they'll go home for the holidays and probably won't go back. And I think Russia knows that. They're extraordinary in their engineering ability for drones, a wide range of drones, but drones don't win wars. Drones are good for sort of celebratory strikes. They make the news. But they don't gain or hold terrain. In fact, I was doing some counting here earlier today in terms of drone activity. This may come as a surprise to you. You know, in the month of July, Russia launched over 6,000 drones in 1 month. 200. That's about 200 drones a day. Most all of those drones were targeting civilian key points, kindergartens, markets, schools, businesses, that sort of thing. And Ukraine launched about half of that. And so I think Ukraine is hurting. I think they know that. I would describe it as survivor bobbing, but you don't want to You don't want to exhibit any sign of weakness, especially with someone like Putin.
I hear you on that one. All right, we're talking with Dr. Jeff Roeder from Rigaku. So what have we learned militarily about Russia's capabilities? I mean, they had to show their hand in some of their technology and their capabilities. What did you learn from that, Jeff?
Yeah, so they're still doing the attrition warfare in World War I. They have not learned how to combine arms. In other words, integrate their indirect fire systems, their air force with their ground. They are uncoordinated at best. It's again, they are. Our challenge in World War I was that you've got so many Russians and so many Russian tanks that as long as their economy allows them to continue building weapons of war, they will literally come after you until you run out of bullets, and then they'll send another wave of soldiers. I think militarily, the things that have probably influenced Putin's decision to ask for this meeting over the last couple of months, I think the actions in Iran, not necessarily Israel's actions, but U.S. military precision to obliterate the Iranian nuclear enterprise. Everybody took note. I think Putin took note because his military could not do that. China took note. And Rocket Man, our leader, Kim Jong-un in North Korea, certainly took note. That is a bridge too far for any of them. And I would match the U.S. military against Russian military any place, anytime. It's really just not a match. Our formations are so much more lethal per soldier, per airman, per Marine than the Russians.
Wow, man, that's overwhelmingly positive and optimistic. You're not getting commission or anything off of that, are you?
No.
I'm just having fun.
And I'm too old. I'm retired from the Army. I'm too old to go back in. They won't take me.
All right. Dr. Jeff, I appreciate your insights once again on the James Show. You can find him at Rigaku, and I'm sure we'll hear from you after the summit, too.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. You can't really overhype this because the potential on what this could be is historic. But also, this might be in a month, 6 months, a year from now. We don't even remember this because there was no fruits of this labor. So we all know that the spectrum is probably going to land somewhere in the middle. But just in case, this is something that will be in the history books that your great grandkids have to learn about long after we're all gone. We have some special guests that are coming up in the next hour. Number one, Monty's going to be joining me from the morning show. Yeah, Monty Cook, the news guy from the morning show. You've been hearing him on WBAP for a long time, probably about as long as I've been listening. But then also in the 4 o'clock hour, Brad Barton. Yeah, the chief meteorologist at WBAP. And he doesn't like to, steer outside of his lane very much. He usually sticks with weather. But he has an impressive depth of knowledge on this story, and we're going to share some of his Russia-Ukraine expertise with you around 4:35-ish. So, special edition of the James Show. This is not the regular Friday whatever. This is maybe history in the making. And I was kind of having some fun with this because I was thinking, once Putin sees that Trump wants to make a deal and he wants a ceasefire and he's willing to give up territory, he's willing to give up the sanctions, Trump's willing to give up, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and make all these concessions. Like, how far you think Putin could go? Because I was thinking, if you're Russian, if you're Putin, wouldn't you like for them to change the ending of Rocky IV? Could that be a demand? Can we go back? We'll just remaster it. We'll put out a special edition where Ivan Drago wins at the end. See, that's the kind of out of the box thinking that Putin, you need to have me on your team, bud. We can make all kinds of amazing things happen. But what about the ending of Red Dawn? You have Patrick Swayze and all his dumb little high school Wolverine friends get killed by some Russians in an AK-47 or a well-placed tank. Oh, man. So the fun part about talking about this story is, jokes aside, Nobody knows how this is going to end. Everyone can have speculation all they want, but no one really knows. And for some reason, I think that's fun. That's exciting. That's not. You don't want to watch a Super Bowl like the one that happened last year every year. You want some of them to be close games. So I was trying to decipher, well, what's in the mind of the Russians right now? Well, Sergei Lavrov, he's one of I think he's like their equivalent of Marco Rubio over there. He landed before Putin did. He got to Alaska a little early. And this was his thoughts as he was walking in.
Мы никогда не загадываем ничего наперед. Мы знаем, что у нас есть аргумент, у нас есть позиция понятная, четкая. Мы будем ее излагать. Здесь уже немало сделано в ходе визитов Стивена Уиткофа. Президент об этом сказал. И Уиткоф выступал от имени президента.
Garrett, can you translate that for me? My Russian's a little rusty here. What did he say? Yeah, I don't know either. It's funny when you hear Russian, and I think this applies to a couple other languages, like a German and maybe even a Polish. It sounds like they're speaking English, but backwards, doesn't it?
Мы никогда не загадываем.
All right, so now I can do this thing because I have an audio editor here because I'm a professional. I'm going to reverse it and see if you can tell, is it any different if I take the Russian he spoke, turn it backwards, and now let's listen to it. That's marginally different. That's barely different, but that's Sergei Lavrov. He was actually saying Trump is in no position to make big demands. Russia's not in the history of giving up to demands, and he was wearing a CCCP shirt, which translates into English as USSR. He's wearing a Soviet Union shirt, and I guess he was just trying to, get in Trump's head or something, but that's the scuttlebutt around the drama surrounding the summit. Coming up next, you're going to hear from Monty Cook from the WBAP Morning Show and get our newsman's take on the historic occasion, Trump and Putin meeting in Alaska right now. That's coming up next on The James Show. News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP.
The James Show Podcast.